Ahoy!
Ahoy!
Welcome to Coffee and Contemplation. I'm Robin.
And I'm Steve.
And we're discussing Chapter 6, The Dive.
The Dive.
Random fact, we actually both have coffee today, which
yes, we do.
Has not been the custom of the past few episodes. But
my boy loves iced coffee more than Ben Affleck.
For this episode, though, we're just going to dive right into our contemplation. Pun absolutely intended.
It's kind of great that we pick up in the Hawkins bit here after seeing what's happened, out on the water in the lake. I think it's smart to open here because we get to see Jason's trauma kind of similar to Eddie's after Eddie had seen Chrissy. We get to see another character that actually witnessed what was going on. We have to sort of suspend our own disbelief even in some of these moments, because while we have seen these things as, dear viewers of this awesome narrative, this is our first time seeing Jason really witness what happened. I mean, he knew and had heard about the atrocity of what had happened to Chrissy. And of course, that elevated him into this place of hunting down information, hanging on every crumb and thread to get to this point now where he thought he was chasing Eddie and possibly going to save the day, and wouldn't that be great? Our plucky little, high school athlete from our, hunky-dory town, which that sounds like a plot that has happened in so many movies coming in the 80s and 90s. But I like that it arrives at this place of tragedy. And dear Patrick, I'm sorry to indicate that I felt like his character might have been a little bit red shirt level. I don't love when character deaths get used just to elevate somebody else. But I like that we get here and Jason is manic, crazed, his neurotransmitters just jumping his bridge. And as he's trying to make sense of all of this, this is where the satanic panic really starts to elevate with what he thinks he has seen, what he thinks he knows about Eddie, the Hellfire Club. And I think this scene is essential to getting to the scene that I know we're going to talk about later that you like, that I maybe don't so much.
I see his through line really clearly, again, as Heidi put it, kill it with fire immediately. But the idea that the way he looks up at Powell when they walk up to him, it's like it does almost seem like maybe this is when he's going to get it. I think my thought was, oh, well, there's no way he's going to actually continue to think this is Eddie did this. This is way bigger. And in some ways he doesn't. He's like, oh, Eddie's the vessel for it. But at the same time, it's like, no, he almost doubles down because he just can't handle it.
The circumstances of the Hawkins police and this radicalized military unit that we're seeing, the questioning of information. I just liked that they kind of wed those two scenes a little bit together here, just because it felt similar in tone. And this episode to me does feel like one of tonally the most out there episodes, as we'll definitely get there, as I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
But I liked that this started very strong and very serious right out of the gate.
Same. And actually, the scene with the interrogation also happens right after the series credits, the intro. And so in a way, what I think is interesting is it ends up drawing this interesting parallel, I think, between Sullivan and Jason. It's particularly because of the way they are juxtaposed and put more or less right next to one another, in that they're two very different kinds of radicalization. They both believe with absolute certainty that they are acting from a place of good, of right, and absolutely dire necessity. And they believe what they're doing. That is in no way comparable to the way that Brenner is behaving, for example. It's a very different energy.
Oh, very different.
So I like that parallel, and that's kind of why I think the interrogation scene is really important, and especially in terms of where it falls, because it also is not juxtaposed with the town hall meeting either. It's right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and talk about the town hall meeting, because that's the center point of this arc in this episode.
All of the actions in this episode are sort of building toward that scene and that moment, so that way we're getting our thumb back on the pulse of what does the town of Hawkins know and or think about these events that are happening? Because in the course of this one season alone, we've had multiple kids be left in this murder trail of Vecna's onslaught. And it is good to see them emotionally tired, exhausted, hurt. But one of the things that I think it's building up toward, and like, you know, we've talked numerous times about how Stranger Things pulls influence from other media and mediums from around this time period. And a movie I can't help but think of is Footloose, you know, where we've got sort of opposing forces bringing up what's good for the town and what's bad for the town. And I think Jason here is kind of like our Ren McCormick, you know, where instead of him saying, hey, let's get dance back in the town because that's good and it will incite, you know, community amongst us, we kind of go the opposite direction. He brings up very real information, but kind of divides the town. You know, it's more of a divisive thing. And maybe not divide the town, because the town actually seems pretty on Jason's page by the end of this. And I mean, how could they not be? They want this to stop. They don't feel like the police are doing enough. It's like Jason played all of the right buttons, you know?
Well, and even the comparison is also to Ren is also really interesting because he quotes scripture as well.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yep.
Did he, and is the bit in the very beginning of the episode when Jason said,
how do you stop the devil if you don't believe he's real? Yeah, that's
right.
I'm going to touch on that in final thoughts because I think that's a really powerful question for the whole episode.
Cool. We can touch back on that later. But no,
yeah.
that's great, because that hammers home that influence even more, that, you know, maybe this was coming from Footloose, you know, that type of influence, you know, and here was a town that thought dancing was the devil, you know, and in this context, we get to pull from a very real period of time in the Satanic Panic that D&D is the devil, you know, and I can see that.
And having very real world consequences
as
far as they believe it to have. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think maybe the scene accomplished what it needed to, because I didn't like it. So it left me with a feeling of, I don't like this.
That sounds a lot like what I said about the stuff with 11 last episode.
Yeah.
Actually.
Like,
yeah.
I think it accomplished what it wanted to, but did it make me feel good? Did I like it? No. This is where I felt, you know, things start to go full tilt. I was like, ooh, it's out of control now. And also, if I'm maybe trying to jump into my writer's and director's mind too, that is the most interesting choice, is for this to spiral out of control. Everybody's hysteria is only going to elevate this even more. I empathize with characters that don't have the information that I, the viewer, do, because maybe that's my actor's brain, but I feel like he played all of the right choices. I mean, he's operating from a place of not knowing so much crucial information that we, the viewers, have. That paints us in this way of being like, cool, we have these feelings about him, but I definitely empathize with him because he saw something atrocious happen. He already knew about what happened to his girlfriend. His personal investment and stake in this is only getting deeper, which is, I think, why by the time we get to the end of this, it all makes sense to see where he arrives at the very end.
I love the way the sequence is shot. I love how all of the angles on Jason are so meticulously intentional, the way they're primarily either low angle or they have him centered in the frame, or both. The way he comes in with all those players flanking him, like it's not so heavy-handed that it's cheesy, because it's so grounded in the seriousness of the moment. But the fact that Erica is, I think I said something like, if you need anybody to stand up to somebody else, it's Erica. She's the only one who stands up in that. I mean, other than the police, but like her, just the facts. Like, I just love her so much. I mean, because the parents are all sitting there, like the Sinclairs, the Wheelers, and Ms. Henderson. They're all like, we don't feel safe to speak up. We don't know what the right move is here. These are our kids. We know they're not evil, but like, what have they gotten involved? Like I love that that all of that is conveyed without any dialogue apart from Erica's just the facts. But even her doing that, it's a slight moment of levity. It has no effect. And that's what I love how that has been, we've been building to this all season, and how, yeah, Jason has all of this influence. And again, compared to the way that someone like Eddie would have been treated in that same space, even if he wasn't the one they were all pointing the finger at. Something we've talked a lot about on this podcast is so often the Duffer Brothers don't fully commit to commentary or actually tackling certain things. They'll bring them up, but they don't follow through with them. This feels like a take. This feels like commentary as opposed to the satire that we saw in season 3, as Heidi pointed out. And that's another reason why the interrogation doesn't bother me, because they're not treating that with comedy. They're not like, America's always the good guy. It's like, it's a lot more complex than that. And but it's also not like they're 100% pure evil either, because again, you compare that interrogation to this town hall meeting. Again, both Sullivan and Jason, they fully believe what they're saying. And so that's why, again, I said it a lot last episode, but like, that's why these characters are so dangerous.
You know, I say I didn't like it probably because I was emotionally seeing some resonant chords with things that we've seen in recent years.
That is fair.
And yeah, it's exactly that radicalization, you know, maybe even, and I know I'm really going out on a whim with this because this is pretty kind of liberal and to an extreme to say, but like Jason is taking information, a limited amount of information, where we, the viewers, have so much more, and he's weaponizing it against a minority group. So that feels icky. I don't love that.
Yes.
And that to me feels like the metaphor here. Because sure, in the context of this fiction narrative, I can see something like a D&D club as a minority group, but in the grander scope of things, this is so much bigger than that. 100%. And we've certainly seen that weaponization or limited use of scripture against groups of people. So much of this felt real, as well as emotionally tense. And that's, I don't know, like that's where I'm like, this definitely worked.
The only other thing I want to note on is the fact that I've seen a number of folks on TikTok talking about this.
Oh.
Is that, where the hell is Scott Clark?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he would absolutely have been there. And how there's a lot of speculation about how would this moment have played out if Scott Clark was there. You know, he's also, something that I thought about was how he is good with kids. So he might have even been able to reach Jason, but potentially in a way that no one else can. But the reason that I find that I don't mind him not being there is because I don't think that reaching Jason is the point. Like, I really think that, you know, he is kind of past the point of rationality, and I don't think that anyone could have talked him down, and narratively no one's supposed to. So while Mr. Clark not being there is kind of a continuity error of sorts, or even a plot hole, it would have complicated this moment in a big way. And because I like the scene a lot as it is, it ultimately, I do want to know where he is. Like, I do find myself wondering that, but I'm also not. I think that, again, him being there would have muddied the waters a little bit. And I like what this scene is doing without him there. So
that's true.
I kind of, in that sense, I can't not say that I'm sort of two minds about it. But my kind of headcanon is that he's not in town because he left for spring break. He went somewhere to like visit family, or just, you know, did some traveling or whatever, like something, because it is spring break in Hawkins. So like maybe he traveled. Like, that's kind of my headcanon. But I mean, because if he was in town, I agree with a lot of the critique of that he would absolutely be there, because he was there for the search for Will. Like, Will was one of his students. Kind of like what I said about Eddie not being present in chapter 4. I don't think the episode fully suffers from him not being there. No. Like, I think that the community suffers from it, but I don't. But I think that, again, narratively, I think this is all the point, so it works for me. Yeah. And I might be in the minority there, but that's generally where I fall with this whole sequence.
Well, I feel like Stranger Things sort of falls into the same problem that Marvel has sometimes with introducing a new character
100,000%.
and needing to give them so much
Yep.
levity or screen time or introduction, and then taking characters that have existed for a while and just not giving them anything. And Mr. Clark is a great example of a character who is not dead, who has had a great influence on so many characters, and especially, you know, our youths in this particular narrative. He's one that I would love to see come back. This could have been a great, let's bring back a character versus let's give Susie this or let's give Argyle that. And maybe I'm just harping on those characters in particular. It's just, I even think those characters could have been given something better. So if it was going to be that, then why not give something to Scott Clark?
And I think that actually might be a really great segue into talking about California, or the California crew anyway. They arrive at Susie's house.
Let me just say that so much about this whole sequence to me is just outrageous. That is my whole take in general. I don't know that I maybe give it as much grace or love that maybe some of the wider internet might give it. I think Susie deserved better. I also think the California crew deserved better.
That's a good way to put it.
I just think all around the board, this is unfortunate screen time that I think all these characters deserved more and better from. And it got presented in a way that I felt was so, I just can't get around saying it this way, but Disney Channel-esque. The erratic nature of it, the sound, I mean, even the music, you know, right when we shift over into this sequence was like...
symphonic.
Yeah. It felt so different and so like, wait a minute, what are we doing? Like, where are we at now? I have a hard time forgiving this scene in the context of like where we started. Comedy relief and the use of comedy as a tool would have been in the rising action of this show.
Yes.
But I'm still very much in the camp that's saying like, we're in the business end of the show now. You know, we're working towards this, you know, like I said before, movie finale. This felt wildly jarring to me, both in this episode and in this season.
The problem for me with this is that it doesn't actually amount to much, and it's just too long. There's too much of it. But part of it too is that it's like this whole sequence feels thematically very at odds. Like, well, maybe not thematically, but stylistically very at odds with what so much of the show has been about from the beginning of this season, being the kids are growing up, they're getting older, they're growing out of their the more childhood genre-esque conventions, whereas this feels very much the opposite direction. It's padded. It feels very padded. It feels like a side quest that we simply don't need.
A side quest is a really great way of putting it, because I mean, just in terms of where the California crew is, where are they going, even just to make this scene happen? All of it feels so away from the track that they're on. It's a fetch quest.
I mean, there are moments about it that I do actually enjoy, like Eden and Argyle. I think that's cute. Her looking like Ali Sheedy from Breakfast Club, that doesn't bother me. Like that makes sense to me. Like it offends me no more than Dacre Montgomery wearing a costume that was clearly supposed to be inspired by Rob Lowe.
None of those bothered me either. And in fact, it's those influences that I also tend to just kind of be like, oh man, I love that. I'm in on it with you. And I like that choice.
You know, and even them like being at the computer and Mike doing the, can you print this? And her doing that, like, no, my ability stopped there, and then hitting the print button. Like that's levity that works. My problem is you don't need that scene to be, you don't need the whole, my computer was taken because I confessed my sins, blah, blah, blah. Like so much of that is unnecessary. And while yes, I agree that some of the levity, we need the bit of a breather. That's why I say they swung a little too hard, because they just did the most with this and not in a good way. And I think my other big issue is that why do they not just bring Susie into the fold? It doesn't, she absolutely deserved to know. I think she would have handled it well. Because I actually still like her. That's why I like you saying like she deserved better, because I'm like, yeah, I think that she is still cute as a button. I like her as being Dustin's girlfriend. That makes total sense to me. I just think that it's the circumstances around Susie that are absolutely, ridiculous and unnecessary. Yeah. So it would have just made it a lot more smooth. Yeah. Like, let's go ahead and just bring her in. Like, why are we lying to her? And I get the sense, the need for being safe, but I think we're kind of, to echo something you said earlier, I think we're a little past that. And it just would have helped move the story along. Like, the conflict of also telling her the truth, I think would have been a very driving force in this sequence alone. And that would have carried so much more weight without having to spend quite so much time with it. Bring her in.
Would have loved it.
Yeah.
Her energy against just general stupidity of those four boys would have been awesome.
Well, or, what I found myself thinking a lot about was the scene from season 2 when Lucas tells Max. And I like that this could have been a really interesting counterbalance to that in terms of how does Susie react.
Susie's energy would have been like Deus Ex Machina compared to this group. And I mean, she basically was.
The real reason that I find that I almost resent this sequence is because from where I'm sitting, take all of this back, trim this down as lean as you possibly can, and give me an epilogue at the end of the season, a longer epilogue. I would trade every frame of this hullabaloo for a chance to see the rest of the party react to Eddie's death, to see more of them processing it. This is ultimately worthless. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't build character. It doesn't, apart from them actually finding the IP address and the location, it doesn't actually move the story forward.
No, it's a lot of lost time.
It's the equivalent of busy work. Like all it does is delay the acquisition of the information they need, which is why we're referring to it as a side quest and a fetch quest.
Yeah.
But it does. It's like, really? We had to spend, in terms of the economy of your storytelling, the fact that you're going to spend this, you're going to invest the amount of screen time on this instead of the follow through and the impact that Eddie's death is going to have, even if they didn't know the kind of impact that character was going to have. The idea that you can't understand, they know how important he is to Dustin. They give Dustin that death side goodbye. There's no way you don't know that that's going to hit Dustin really hard. They give him the eulogy. They give Dustin the eulogy for Eddie. It's like, let's spend more screen time with that.
Yeah.
As one of my favorite comedians, Hannah Gadsby says, why this decision? Why this decision?
Yeah.
Even the other groups that feel tonally more similar to this or have in the past, speaking specifically of Joyce and Murray in the Russia stuff, even in this episode, that stuff is more grounded and serious than it has been. And so in that sense, it almost stands out all the more in contrast because, as shifting into Joyce and Murray, like, for one thing, when we find them after the crash, like the actors are absolutely outside. You can see their breath. It's cold.
Yeah, it looks cold.
And like, there's even little details that I really liked. Like, I don't know that I've said it yet, but I like that costuming wise, they are bundled up. They are wearing clothes you would have to wear if it was really that cold. And like, Joyce's eyeliner is smudged at one point, like, and not even like really obviously, but it's just a little bit. And I really appreciated that as a small detail, because normally you don't see that. Like, even like with stuff like where like, the clothes might be messed up or there's like cuts and stuff, the makeup is still usually immaculate, but not here. And I mean, no. I really, I imagine that continuity for that is probably hard to maintain.
Oh, I would imagine so. I was just going to say, I feel like there were moments where I actually could feel and tell that she must have been cold because, Murray had a big beard covering up, a lot of his face and his cheeks and whatnot, but we can see so much more of Joyce's flushness. And you can actually see some of the purple and red in her nose and her cheeks, and that contrast. So I was definitely feeling and believing how cold she was, which I think is what gets to hammer home that moment when they're threatening Yuri, that we don't have to do anything to kill you. We just have to leave you here. Seems to us, your country will do that for us rather than, us having to overtly do anything to you.
And I actually kind of appreciate that in that moment, though, like that it's a little silly.
Yeah.
But I don't mind it because I actually think in this one instance, I do actually like that it doesn't feel serious because they're not really gonna leave him. Like, Joyce and Murray aren't those kind of people. And especially given that you have an actual interrogation in this episode, I like that you can feel the difference between the two. But they don't like go so over the top as they might have. Like, but at the same time, there is a little bit of like, we need to threaten you because we need to know where to go. Like, we are in a very, so I like the way that it kind of threaded that needle in this case. I did actually like that. And I like the plan. I like the bit in the warehouse. It you know, the like
Same.
How interesting it is that Murray has not yet revealed that by the end of chapter 5 that he has not revealed to Yuri that he speaks Russian. He still hasn't. And I think that's actually a brilliant decision on Murray's part, character-wise, because it's keeping Yuri in the dark.
Big time.
It's a really subtle way of kind of indirectly saying that, like, how they're thinking about it all.
Yeah, Joyce and Murray might only have so many cards, but they're playing them close to their chest, which is great. And I love their chemistry, which is why even if I can critique the Russia plot on the whole, I still love them, their pairing and their energy.
Same.
And I like that, again, Swiss Army knife Murray fits in everywhere, which is solid. And I love when he kind of was borderline threatening Yuri, and then it shifts right back over to Joyce, and she's just kind of like, da.
Yeah.
And like, it was just silly enough that I was like, this is great.
Joyce and Hop's relationship is different, but I think this is more the spirit of what I wanted in season 3. Mm-hmm. So far through this critical rewatch, this is definitely my favorite stuff of Joyce and Murray so far. Mm-hmm. Because also, like you, I enjoy the scene where Murray gets to be a little bit over the top because they have every right to be furious with him. So, like, he tricked them. He drugged them. Like, there's a level of like,
there's a whole lot of things that are wrong here.
Yeah, we don't mind maybe scaring you a little bit. Yeah. Like, and that Murray, I think, is enjoying kind of giving it back. Like when he's like, a moron, and then laughs in his face.
The other things that are kind of adding up to me here too, especially with Murray, are just that his energy right now is got to be like shooting through the roof. Like, dude is riding the high of just got out of cuffs on a plane, fought, landed, not dead. And at this moment in time, maybe what might even be more important to him is like, he's probably feeling intellectually superior right now, too, to be coming out on top at the end of all of this and have captured Yuri. And, like a D&D party and the idea of assuming somebody else's identity and trying to play yourself off as the enemy soldier or something like that. We know that that's where this is going. I love Yuri as Murray, or Murray is Yuri.
Easy switch
Got
to
myself
make.
there.
Yeah.
The thing that we're getting here that I'm like, oh, Murray, what a guy.
But while we're in Russia, let's stay here. Let's talk about Hopper.
Okay. Yeah.
I found myself like actively enjoying some of this stuff a little more than I remembered.
Sure.
On the first couple times I watched through it. I love when they lead. When we first see him in the episode, like when they lead the group out of the cell, just the framing of Hopper like coming up into the frame as the last person. I'm like, okay, I love that as like a cinematographic way of communicating. Like, he's ultimately going to be the one in charge now. Like he's almost assuming that kind of leadership role. Like that's where his head is at, like right away, even if maybe he's not aware of that he's doing that. I don't know. Like I liked that as a cinematographic blocking choice.
And even if it was in an unassuming way, we know that he knows more than what the group he's in knows about where they're going, where they're headed. He's got that insider knowledge that, will at least start to connect some pieces between Russia and hey, Demogorgon.
Well, it feels like a really good place to start because I think it ends up serving as a really nice balance of where ultimately the episode ends, because it doesn't have the hopelessness feel that he had it in the last episode. And I think that's important because if it opened with him looking less, I don't know, powerful for lack of a better term, then it's not subtle. but I'm not mad about it. But like if he had looked more despondent, if they had him trailing out, then I think the episode might have had a harder job of like making it believable that he makes the choice to fight. Like he's clearly deciding. He's decided when they go in, he's like, oh, this is our last meal. I'm going to get the alcohol. I'm going to make the show. Like, this is clever, sneaky Hopper, and I love it. It's my favorite version of him. I like, as hard as it is to see him, again, go through some of this stuff, like, I love watching his mind work.
Yeah.
And that is one area where I do actually feel like some of this stuff has some really interesting and rich rewatch value because you're able to see, like, or excavate, like, where is he making certain decisions? When is he deciding? When is he putting pieces together? And it's not always 100% clear. And that is very season 1 Hopper to me. And I loved that about this.
And I gotta hold myself to the flame a little bit here because I know I just spoke about Susie's scene being so, tonally strange and different, and, that was one section in a single episode, and Russia on the whole has felt kind of like that, the lost time to me, which is probably why some of Russia I just kept wanting to get through as quickly as possible.
I don't disagree with that.
But this was some of the better Russia for me because I was starting to see at least the Demogorgon come into it in a very threatening way, but also in this way where, yes, Hopper is taking this unassuming lead in the group with the information that he knows. And, I think that him and Antonov are, I'm enjoying their chemistry as well. And I also love that actor. And speaking of another person, I just would love to see more, do more voiceover as well, is the actor playing Antonov.
Tom Wakastia?
How powerful his voice is as a character in Game of Thrones as well. Like one of the most memorable roles, a character who didn't even have a name, but his voice so recognizable. But yeah, I wish we could have gotten Hopper back sooner. Or if the end was always going to be the same, then why did it take this long? There's so many questions I'd love to writer's room ask about Russia and getting to this point, because I just wonder if there were other ideas. I'd love to know what other thoughts they had, or if there were even other routes that they thought about going. I just wonder if there was something besides Russia, or besides this length of time that was Russia through this entirety of season 4, that either Hop could have gotten back sooner, or if the journey back could have even started sooner, or something like that.
I mean, in, kind of a TLDR way to put it is less is more. I think that's what I think this season needed a little, just in general, is less is more.
Less is more.
In fact, that's why I think having like Eddie not being in chapter 4, Elle not being in chapter 4, the fact that we don't see the California crew in chapter 7, it's that same mentality. I think not having quite so much of some of these other non-Hawkins based, let's be real, plot lines, I think would have ultimately served the narrative really well. It makes the seeing them again that much more powerful. I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot you can cut from Hopper's arc or from Joyce and Murray. Like they're actually used very sparingly this episode, Joyce and Murray. But yeah, like The Last Supper itself. I mean, I talked when I guested on ham radio about the fact that there's the massive continuity error of Hopper has never fought a Demogorgon.
Yeah, I was about to say.
But the reason that actually doesn't bug me is because it's like, how would he possibly have explained that to them in a way that would have had the impact that it needs to? So I actually think Hopper makes, like at the time that I did it, I think I was like, oh, it's just the writers using shorthand. But I actually think that was, I'm gonna change my mind. I think that was Hopper making the conscious decision to use that shorthand to make himself sound more impressive.
Yeah.
And he would know all of these things because he does know these things because they've debriefed as a party.
That's what I was thinking, was in the shared party knowledge of their past experiences against the Demogorgon and any of the other forces of evil therein at this point. I felt like it was a strong and bold choice. And in the context of his not speaking their language and Antonov having to translate everything, which they also, I think, did tastefully pretty well, all things considered. And if I needed to feel like I was any one of these other prisoners, that was enough. He knew more than somebody else did.
Well, and he has fought Demodogs, and he has
Yeah.
seen the Mind Flayer. I think he's seen the Mind Flayer. He's at least seen the Mind Flayer at the end of season 2, like through the gate with Elle. So it's not like he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And
like, is it a little lie? Maybe.
Yeah.
But is it just a little one that's little enough that maybe for the context here, it doesn't really bother me too much? Yeah. I would hate to see him over-explain.
Yes, it would lose.
Yeah.
You would lose the momentum of the scene. You'd lose the flow of the scene.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what matters anyway. What
Yeah.
I
I wouldn't
find
want to see them questioning the credibility
Right.
of his knowledge, because it is true. And I don't know. I don't think they have any other reasons to disprove or disbelieve him either, especially if we're, kind of in this moment that is, what do these characters have to lose now?
Right.
Especially that they're, I don't know, the last crew at the end of the world here that are going to fight this thing in a very most dangerous game way. And, we're plumping you up.
Which that though is the only that actually bothers me a lot more is
Yeah.
this and I found myself wondering, is Hopper not eating just to prove a point? Does it matter? You haven't eaten real food in how long? Like, you're hungry. Like, as another one of my favorite comedians, Gabriel Iglesias, like he said something way back in one of his first stand-up specials where he said, I want to die full. Like, and so the idea of it being their like last meal maybe is sickening and would make you lose your appetite. But at the same time, I found myself also thinking of like, just, okay, but it's still food. Although it's the way a lot of the food is shot, it doesn't look terribly appetizing.
I was just about to say, this scene, like the extravagance and the opulence of this spread on this table next to what has been these like gray walls and just void of color.
Yeah, the
prison,
candlelight. Yeah.
It was very different. So it
Yeah.
landed in this very weird way where I was like, this is the strangest
Yeah.
meal setup that I think I could have seen in this environment. This almost does feel like it's going a little too out of its way.
But I like, though, that it doesn't, like, the room feels small. The
Yeah.
table feels small. Like, the
Dark
guy,
and intimate. The
guys,
candlelight.
yeah, the candlelight. The guys are basically shoulder to shoulder. Like, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of room. And that's why I say, like, I kind of have a lot of mixed reactions because I both really like it and appreciate the level of detail that is at play here. But yeah, it is a little bit odd.
It just stands out, that's all. And it's not to say that anything's totally wrong about it, but there is just something about the table spread, the lighting. It is very different juxtaposed to what's been this prison environment. And with the candlelight and everything too, it does feel especially intimate.
That feels intentional though.
Yeah?
Like in a way where like it is supposed to feel off. Like when Hopper walks in and just stands there looking at it while everybody else swarms around the table.
Goes for it.
It's like, and then when Hopper tells them like, no, we are being plumped up, as you said, like we're here.
Plump it up, plump it up.
Yeah, we're here to feed the monster, like that. So then to have them all be like, that I think is deliberate based on everything you just talked about.
Mm-hmm. And I do like that at least through the course of this bit that Hop is sharing with them about what's really going on here, I can start to see where this group is actually buying into his unassuming leadership.
Well, this is very much, I mean, if we're using the hero's journey model, this is very much accepting the call.
Oh yeah.
And I love
yeah.
I love that because I think we saw rejection of the call last episode, or at least, or sort of, loosely. But I like, because I mean, when they go out into back towards their cell, that like fake fight with I love everything pretty much of Hopper and Antonov from that point on, like in the episode. Like I love even the other guard like doing the stop talking, be quiet, like the way that all of that is done. And like we need something to light it on fire. Like my feeling at the end of that scene was, oh yeah, game on.
Yeah,
bring on the Demogorgon. Let's do this.
I think this is where that excitement of knowing a future Colosseum-esque style fight would be coming. This is where that really started to cement itself. And regardless of whether or not I thought any one bit could have been wasted or too over the top, the fanboy in me was very excited.
And when it ended, I was like, ready for more. Before we circle back to Hawkins, though, let's chat Elle. Definitely came into this episode not wanting to delve into Elle's arc because of how it ended last time.
But also, this is the point at time in which we really start to like see where Henry is in this story to then become Vecna, all of the above, where we're seeing Henry's involvement prior to the big incident.
It doesn't delve into quite as much of the stuff that I found so troubling in chapter 5, but to be honest, I was surprised when I started editing that episode, and even when we were recording it, I was surprised how strongly I felt about that episode. I didn't realize how harshly I was coming across, and to be fair, in this episode, I think also, it's called The Dive, right? Which is most obviously referencing Steve's dive, but I think we're kind of getting Elle diving in a new way. I mean, very early on in the episode, like her walking down the hall and then getting into that tank, like it's the first time we've seen her do that. Like,
it's really eyeballing up the suit that she wears when she goes into the tank too, which is one we've seen her wear before. It was us, I think, seeing her come back to this in new terms.
I mean, kind of some of the stuff you were saying about Hopper, it's almost like the inverse. Like, I almost wish we could have started this arc here, that this is how it was when this energy is where we started. Like, we just got here faster.
Would have been awesome.
The moment where Elle tells Brenner about what she remembers of the massacre, like early on in the episode, I really love Brown's performance there. Like, that's one of her standout moments in this episode, which is saying something because she does a lot this episode. But I think partly the reason it jumps out is because of how undershot it is. Like, because this is the first time she is saying those words out loud. Like, it's kind of a capital M moment, but they don't shoot it like it is. She's performing it like it is, which is why I want to specifically acknowledge her performance there. Because I'm like, she's given it everything. Like, this is the first time she is saying this thing that's been haunting her all season so far. I mean, literally, it comes up in chapter 1.
It's a MacGuffin in a sort of way, because we know coming soon that she did not truly do that, but seeing it the way that this moment has been dissected to us and sort of deconstructed up to now, putting the pieces together that she had in this moment on this dive, so to speak. I mean, how could we not be tail spinning and diving down with her? I felt awful for her because really heavy. Like, Doc, this is heavy stuff.
Yeah. The scene where she talks with VH1 about the Papa doesn't always tell the truth. This moment is where one of the first occasions when I think her age begins to get murky. Jamie Campbell Bower is playing it beautifully, and that, he's playing it like he is, like, a lot of the way he's delivering his lines feel very much like he is speaking to a younger child, which I really appreciate. I've really wrestled with how to articulate this, but a lot of what she's asking don't feel like they're necessarily that they would have come from her younger self. They feel so motivated by her present self that it begins to, like, we're blurring the lines, which is why I know there are some people who think that, like, that he is there with her presently.
Throughout all of that?
Well, or at least some of it. Like, mostly I've heard that said about his epic monologue in chapter 7, but that some of it is him talking directly to her present day. I don't know if I subscribe to that theory necessarily, but I think that the reason people feel that is because it does get murky. And I feel like that, to me, is the biggest problem with this mechanic of, it's not just a flashback. She's literally living through it as her present self. And but I also feel like it's very likely that the reason it happened that way is because they weren't going to be able to do these as flashbacks. I think that was probably what they wanted to do. I don't think they've said that anywhere. If they have, then there you go. But I haven't heard them say it, but that's the vibe I get. And that this was kind of their compromise of, like, this is how we're going to walk through these sequences. Because they probably, I mean, as big as their budget is, to do a full face replacement for Millie Bobby Brown
is a lot.
It's a lot. And we do need this information. We need these sequences. So I appreciate the difficulty that they were probably put into with this stuff. But that doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that for me, it gets a little confusing. Keeping kind of a monitor on like, who is he talking to? Would 9-year-old 11 really be asking this? How much psychologically is she aware of at this point?
Yeah.
Not so much because of her age, I mean, kind of, but based on her worldview, her understanding of life at this point, being raised in that environment. A lot of this felt very unclear to me.
Unclear is a good way to put it. I felt like I had to suspend my disbelief and wonder even further than maybe normal. So I knew the context of the memories, but then I also had to then be like, okay, hold on, wait a second. I am watching a TV show that is already about the supernatural, already about horrific elements. I just got to suspend my disbelief just that much further, that I'm basically in a machine that is like living in dream space where I can reimagine and re-see things that have already happened. A part of me was like, wow, how Black Mirror-esque of Stranger Things to have gone that route as well.
I mean, that shot where Nina closes on her.
Yeah.
That's one of the scariest moments to me of the episode. Like, holy, like, woo.
Yeah, it makes me feel like I can't breathe.
Yeah. And also like as an sorry to keep cutting you,
go ahead.
but also as an evolution of what we saw in season 1 of her going into the tank. So it was, I do have to be honest, that part was actually really well done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Extremely well done. I just know that at this point, like, what a very delicate acrobatic trick to take a moment from the past and then technology that I needed to suspend my disbelief with, and then present all of that to us as an audience and have me buy all of it and not think, oh, okay. On one end of it, I say incredibly well done. Like, I want to give the applause for like landing that acrobatic trick.
Well, and the ambition of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that ultimately worked, and that's tough.
I do. I applaud their ambition. I applaud the fact that they came up with a story device, a plot device that would allow them to be able to have also Millie Bobby Brown still play 11. But at the same time, I think for me, what I'm ultimately saying is like, I can both appreciate that ambition, but I think that's just an inherent problem that they were going to have no matter what.
They dealt with a lot of stuff that we kind of already knew was happening in the facility. And, you know, we got to see 11 being bullied. The
bullying makes more sense to me here. The line, talk about this and we'll kill you, that might be pushing it a little bit for me.
A little bit, I think. There's probably a complex in number 2 that is a, why am I not number 1?
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, to have number 11, who is 9.
Yeah.
And especially when he says, I was holding back. A genuine question. Were you, though?
I like to think he wasn't holding back. That was his overcompensating for himself because it was in front of the other numbers. That was why.
And it ends on such a bleak note. It's not as uncomfortable and upsetting as last episode's was with her arc, but her waking up and saying, I killed them all. I mean,
oh God, it hurt.
It did.
It's awful.
I was definitely not putting it. I mean, I know a lot of like Jenna and Heidi both were like, no, I don't think they were mad because they felt like they were framing it like we were supposed to believe it. And that's what pissed them off. I mean, they sold it to me. I definitely thought that was what we were building to. And that's why I was mad, because I didn't like this idea of taking her character in that direction.
Seeing her fall into this place so quickly on the information that she's seen, which, you know, she's barely skimming, you know, touching the surface of this memory. Yeah, it is awful. Like, it makes me feel for her because I just don't want her to hurt.
Well, let's talk about some kids that aren't in quite so much pain. Let's round this thing out with the party.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go back to the Hawkins party.
Back to Hawkins and finish this thing out. The first thing that occurred to me on this rewatch during the ride back to Reefer Rick's, during, you know, Robin is doing the like, I just can't stand to see the light leave Eddie's eyes and like that whole thing. I noticed that this is when they've all changed clothes. So the question that occurred to me, why didn't they bring Eddie some new clothes? He is wearing the same outfit. I think I said this last time. It's a great outfit. But the fact, and it reminded me a lot of in the season 1 actually, when I said, why don't they give Eleven some new clothes, like right after she gets out of the bathtub.
Oh yeah,
she's still wearing that dress for the remainder of the episode. I'm like, why didn't we bring her some spare clothes? She clearly fits Mike's clothes at that point. They're the same size. Like, why don't
at least something?
But no, Eddie still has to run around in the wet clothes, and he has to like be in the same outfit, like literally that he was last seen in.
I'm with you though, like the characters have changed clothes. We're in a new set, in like a new day, so to speak, I guess, as we're pushing forward. And I love what's going on driving in that old station wagon too. Like my grandparents used to have one of those with the 2 seats in the back that faced out the back. I used to love that, like riding with my brother. And so I loved seeing that the choice was that Steve and Dustin were back there. It made sense to me that the 2 Bro Beans boys, would be hanging out in the back.
But I like that once they get there, and we do have that tonal change to hearing the announcement that Eddie's name is now being broadcast. Particularly, I like Lucas's reaction to Patrick's death. Like here, it's very succinct. But apart from anything else, they were teammates. They spent time together. Like it would rattle him, probably not dissimilarly to the way that Fred's death rattled Nancy.
Yeah.
But it was funny because when we get the part where Eddie reaches them on the walkie, why don't you move a little further away before you talk to Eddie when the cops are right there, when there's a huge crowd there?
Yeah. If Eddie's been identified as a person of interest, then don't they know that anybody else is probably also looking for them?
Yes, exactly. And then we get the hike to Skull Rock. We get the 2 exchanges. We get Lucas and Max, and we get Nancy and Robin.
I love Lucas and how pure he is in his friendship with Max, because like it's friendship, but it is so purely loving, and I adore that. And by the time he's really there with her and saying that he sees her and that he's here, I love this moment because it's only going to make what's coming later that much more tragic. And so I love that he is trying to make himself so available when he says, I wasn't looking before, and now I really see you. I loved what he was really saying there, which was, I'm sorry, I have not been listening.
At first, it kind of, this exchange bugged me a little bit, because it was like we saw him going out of his, like just in the season as we've seen, we watched him reaching out, trying to be there for her, like almost too hard in a way. So at first my reaction was like, what are you talking about? And then it occurred to me that this is him saying that's why he was behaving that way. And I love this as being so directly in conversation with that. I'm right here. Like I like how much that all flows together and how those scenes all build on each other. Like just really, really effective.
I guess talking in the cultural zeitgeist of today, and just, mental health being a stigma in and of its own at times, to see characters healthily and adequately walk through like an intentional check-in with one another is really valuable. And that's where I feel like we see this emotionally wise beyond his years Lucas in this moment right now, because he knows that he's not operating right now in this moment from a place of self-interest, from love for Max, or wanting that love, or for it to be reciprocated. It's just so pure.
I don't know. I think some of that is there, but I don't think it's a bad thing that that's there also.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it works. I also like that it's sort of him saying, so this person that I knew is apparently dead, and now apparently he had a much harder time than I had any idea. And he's sort of he's realizing that he wasn't paying attention, and he's applying that to another person that's in his life. Then he's like, I'm not going to make that mistake twice. I love that application. at the same time, I do get a lot out of Robin looking over at them and going, oh, they're just so cute.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I love the conversation there, because as much as I think everybody at various points, whether it's Robin to Nancy or Eddie to Steve, talking about the relationship that is Stancy, like I'm all for it, but I like that those characters are still seeing it from this very well-founded, like, we are in a moment of crisis and I care about this person.
But what I like about this moment, though, is that even though that's kind of what initiates the conversation, I actually really like the way that they have Nancy talking about her relationship with Jonathan. Basically, she gives this long-winded way of saying, I miss him and I don't know why this is going this way. And she's not relieved about it. So I like that it's not like really cut and dry. I mean, as much as I hate the love triangle of it all, I do like that at least they're not making it blatantly one obvious way or another.
Frankly, I feel for Nancy, because given the circumstances that have happened in these last few episodes, with Jonathan not coming for this trip, as well as what is happening and her inability to get a hold of him, I like that she's still giving him like the benefit of the doubt, given they're already all in extreme circumstances.
One of the only things I don't like about this exchange with Robin is that I kind of wish that they'd spent a little bit more time on something other than that, because this would have been an excellent time to give them a Bechdel Wallace pass, and they don't.
Yeah, they don't pass it. Don't love that. I like that it at least started from a place of like earnest and honest curiosity on Robin's part.
Yes.
In wanting to be friends, identifying that we're friends, and wanting the best for her friends. Those are all things that I believe, and I think that's genuine. So I guess what maybe I like the most about this, and I'll just give them the little like, yeah, this could have been weird, but I'm glad it wasn't, was that Robin asked a question about Steve, and Nancy chose to answer it about Jonathan. And I think that's really the biggest thing we were supposed to walk away with. And great, because I think we got it.
Well, and I kind of like that Nancy's also like, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like, oh, hey, like, she's like, no, I'm actually kind of having a hard time with this over here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not funny. And Robin respects
that. I'm glad we're
that.
seeing that it's that difficult and complicated.
Yeah. But that said, I do like the button on the end of their exchange of like, so does this make us friends? And the like, yeah, I guess so. Like,
Yeah.
I do like that. And then, yeah, we get Skull Rock itself.
Yes.
And I hate this sewing of Eddie's cowardice in massive air quotes. You know, the like, well, I did what I do now, apparently. I ran. Like, again, as opposed to what?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, stay and get arrested? Like,
that felt like a really weird... I was wondering when he said that, if that's how it was written, or if something on the day of, they were like, well, that's not working. Let's edit that. Let's try this. I just wondered why that was where they arrived at.
I think the only alternative really is to turn himself in. And the only advantage, I mean, I really thought about that. I'm like, the only advantage that I can see to him turning himself in would be he turns himself in and people keep dying. But that doesn't actually help anything. Well, and I don't trust Eddie's safety, frankly, based on the way we see, like you said, the way we see Jason handle the crowd in this episode. Like, I just don't think he'd be safe. Although I will say them all debating how to kill Vecna is great.
Yes,
high
I
D&D
did love
vibes. Like, I'm personally with Lucas. Yeah, cut the head off.
Yeah,
like, that's always my D&D move.
And
always.
I love anytime a good nerdy reference is brought up by either the group or a little bit of characters. And so I liked when Mordor was brought up.
Oh yeah.
In particular, and you know, after Dustin and Steve had come down from their frustration and trying to one up the other with what the other knew and how to get to Skull Rock. I liked that Eddie was on board, and then that's sort of what brought people back into the fold of, okay, like we have a united, let's go figure something out. I liked Robin's little one throw in there about the snack size gate.
There's so much of this scene is so good. This is awesome. I love Eddie's complete disinterest in Elle. The mention when Steve brings her up again, he's like, yeah, you mentioned her. Like, I love the fact that it's like that's funny, but he's just not concerned about it. He's like, well, it doesn't matter, she's not here. It doesn't affect us. as much as I do enjoy and I do laugh at the "this is Skull Rock" moment, I actually think that it's more than just there for humor. Like, following up from some of our discussions from chapter 4 and even some of, what we said last episode, this is yet another moment of Steve going, I did a thing. Can I just get some acknowledgement? Like, and I like that because I think that we've been building that, and that's what leads to the moment on the water. But I like it because even by the time we get there, it doesn't feel like he's doing it in a showy way. Before we completely switch to that, though, one last thing I did want to say about the scene at Skull Rock is that I adore almost more than anything else is that fleeting exchange between Dustin and Lucas. The like, do you remember what can affect a compass? An electromagnetic field. How much of a callback it is to season 1. And it's such a swift reminder that Lucas is not just a dork and not just a D&D player. He's a science nerd. Yeah. Just like Dustin. And I love it.
We love it. Yeah. And if the Shire is burning, then let's all go figure it out.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, for all of this, like, yep, I run now. Like, him doing that whole Shire is burning thing, that's him showing a lot of bravery. I don't think that gets enough credit.
Yeah, that's what's good. And that's what hypes up, like, getting Eddie to go.
Dustin
and then
jumping up and down.
Dustin's jumping up and down when he knows that, like, this is gonna get him. Like, it's got him now. Like, he's coming. Like, he already knew before the rest of the group did. And that's why I also love that much more how much my favorite himbo, Steve Harrington, is like,
What's Mordor?
What's Mordor? Where is that?
And I said in our reactions episode that I was like, that is not Steve's fault. At this point, Dustin has failed in his own brotherly duties to introduce Steve to Lord of the Rings. But then, we do get to Lover's Lake, and the information that Steve is a swimmer probably should have come up on the shore. Like, probably. Like, because it's a very justifiable reason for him to be in the boat.
Yeah, he said he was a lifeguard, too.
But it does make for better scenes the way it plays out. So I don't mind it, but I don't love the fact that he sneaks onto the boat in a way, but yeah, it's cute, but I also it doesn't.
Well, and here's where I feel like we're like falling into some of the weeds that I'm like, okay, like, show, why are you even going out of your way to try to explain this to me? Because you're already showing me characters that are jumping in the water wearing all of their clothes. Steve is the only person who at least stripped down and jumped in the water. Anytime I've seen someone jump into the water wearing their clothes, I immediately am like, it's a movie, it's TV, it's fine. But if you have ever tried to swim in your clothes in water, it is so heavy and so almost near impossible. Like, it's just something my brain, kind of instantly checks out a little bit.
Before we get into that on the water fully, I want to just address the joke with Max and the binoculars.
Oh, yeah.
Because I do enjoy the joke. Like, genuinely, it's great. They also don't overdo it.
Yeah.
They don't have Max make a comment. They don't have her make a sound. They don't even have Dustin or Lucas make a comment.
No, I think at best Dustin and Lucas look at each other like, wait, what?
Yeah. And it's great. It's not super. I just remember being so relieved.
Confusing waters here, if you will, because, like, we're talking about adolescent attraction, and that is a very slippery slope to talk about, to display. And I feel like we've sort of seen some of this kind of behavior from, like Jonathan in season 1 with the camera looking into a place that was further away and whatnot. And, as weird and creepery and stalkery as some of those vibes can give, and even maybe the binoculars could do that to a degree, I liked that we did something different. Mm-hmm. I liked that the two boys who are younger than Steve, them not getting it, to Max grabbing it and just not saying anything while looking. I was like, that was well done. But I love when moments like that can just live in the ether to let the mystery be, because who knows how that moment really ended, or how much longer Max was looking, or how much longer the boys just stood there totally dumbfounded, not knowing what to say.
Well, certainly not too terribly long because like eventually you see Dustin with them again going, come on, Steve, come on. Like, because they're worried because it's after he's dived.
Yeah.
So my guess is that Max probably handed them back not long after that. But
yeah. Once he jumped into the water, she was probably like, all right, here you go.
But yeah, like then the scene on the boat, like the interaction between Nancy and Steve is actually one of my now go-to examples of female gaze because it's not perfect, but based on the way that Heidi broke it down in season 3 of the way that, and I agree with her, that Billy is actually shot in a very male gaze way. There's so much emphasis on his physicality and the way that the women are responding to him in that moment. I mean, apart from the joke on the shore, you know, the emphasis in this moment is not on his physicality or his power over others. This is his willingness to do this task that's what draws the attention first. And even if Nancy does give Steve a little bit of an elevator look, that's not all that's going on here. And I like that, you know, again, in contrast to Billy's behavior at the pool, doing and saying something cruel, Steve is about to do something, for lack of a better term, kind of noble. And it isn't a joke about his physicality, like it, you know, at least not from anyone in the boat. Like Nancy's one line to him is about his well-being. It's not, I don't know, like I don't know what else she would have said other than be careful. But again, if you were, they didn't, basically I'm getting at they didn't play it for comedy either. You know, we're continuing the ongoing thread of Steve wanting to be seen and acknowledged. Like this is when, you know, hot take, this is Nancy finally getting that, you know? Yeah, there's probably also some, wow, I forgot how hot you were thoughts going on here. But I also do genuinely believe that it's both.
Yeah,
and that
definitely.
it's and that's why it works as well as it does.
Yeah, I think it sticks the landing because it's a little bit of both.
All of us on the podcast, we've kind of like, you know, gone back and forth about how much is Nancy actually aware of what he's done and can do and what he has to offer. And, you know, I think this is probably the moment where even if she knew what he's done, she hasn't seen it. Yeah. And that's, I think, what I've always kind of been more thinking about and haven't really quite articulated it as such, because it's like, yeah, it's one thing to know that he's done this and he's done that, but to watch him be like, I'm just going to do this. There's no hesitation. There's no flaw in his logic. Just, it's very pragmatic, which is usually how she approaches stuff. And I think the last time she saw him in a scene like this, it was season 1.
Yeah, I think so.
And he's taking charge, and it's like, that's a big deal. I think she's genuinely just seeing what kind of a person he is now for the first time.
I think so too. And something that's striking to me is like, she is seeing the alignment of his words and actions. And let's take that. And if we're talking about the love triangle and the differences, we're seeing somebody who has not maybe been so aligned with their words and actions, the way that she has come to perceive Jonathan up to this point, which has sounded very confused and confusing given what she said to Robin earlier. But yeah, his words and his actions are just a little bit more aligned than a Steve that she knew once before. And maybe she's still seeing some of that recklessness or that inconsistency in Jonathan right now.
Well, he's not there.
But yeah, and he's not there till the very,
absent.
very end. So
yeah. I rewatched that little clip that they released during Geeked Week from last year when they talked to Kiri, Hawk, and Quinn when they asked him about all of this, the whole dive part, and how he talked about like where they filmed it and whatnot. It's the first time I heard about the fact that the idea of him being a swimmer was actually an abandoned season 1 idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said that yeah, they were going to have him like at a swim meet of some sort, and so he was like in a Speedo because it's the 80s.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay. So he's like, I had to get in shape. He's like, I could swim before this, but he's like, but for that, I like went through all this prep. And then he showed up ready to do it. And I mean, not, you know, he's like, and then they were like, oh no, we cut that because we couldn't get a pool. not that you needed that to make this work.
Yeah.
Like him saying that he was on the swim team, like it totally fits.
That's funny. But yeah, it fits. It works.
But I like knowing that it was always there.
Yeah.
That was always something they wanted to do. And it was cool. That it was like, cool. We kind of finally got to do this thing we'd had in mind all the way back at the beginning. So
well, I feel like sometimes, like, as an actor who works on projects and scripts and whatnot, I feel like you get to do so much script homework to build your character, and you get to live off of all these questions and what ifs and proverbial scenarios that aren't actually on the page, but they're definitely helping you land at all the right places that are this character. Like, I don't know. Him being a swimmer is something that I'm like, that's awesome, because I bet he knew this for a long time, or had done this homework to flesh out this character. And so I love in like long form TV like this, when we get to see that stuff really come to fruition later and be like, yeah, I thought this once upon a time about my character, and now it's actually come back to really be a thing. Steve coming back up from the water and us being able to see him by the boat and then him get pulled down and under, to me again was like Friday the 13th.
Okay,
it's the
gotcha.
lake. It's the last shot even in the first movie is Jason coming out of the water and grabbing her and then pulling her into the boat capsizing. You know what, let me ask you this, like, since we're talking so much about Steve, and since we're talking about this, where we're kind of towards the end of this episode anyway, the moment this was over, I immediately watched the next like 10 or 15 minutes. And then I think I was like, okay, good. My boy's still intact. And then I actually think I chose not to watch the rest of that episode. How did you feel about that when you watched this the first time?
The idea that I think it struck me as odd that they would give him the axe this early in the season. I mean, like, it seemed like, I guess they could, but it would be a weird move.
Weird flex.
It would almost be like, we're going to think he's dead, but he's not actually dead yet.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't, because we hadn't had the see you on the other side moment. See you on the other side. Yeah. And then they finished the trailer, but I think that was the Separate Ways trailer, but it just is kind of a button on the end of the whole thing before we like, officially like go into the Upside Down and see, what's happening with Steve. Like, I'd really just like the pacing of this whole sequence too. Like, you sort of forget it's the closing of the episode for a while because of the way, but the way that the police are finding the car earlier builds to this moment. So you even have our party split 3 ways between Steve in the water, the trio in the boat, and the trio on the shore. And it's just, it all really effectively builds to this ending sequence. So not only do you have Steve being attacked and choked to strangled, but you've got everyone's kind of in peril. You don't know where the trio from the boat are. They're in the water, but you don't know how that's going to end, and you certainly don't know what's going to happen. The kids get taken, the police catch them, and we have that moment of like, hey there.
Hey, I've seen you before.
Guys. Yeah, and then so it's like, as a place to structure, again, because I like to harp on structure on this podcast, I really like the way that that's all constructed. That's really, really effectively done. So it's not, mostly it's the idea that Steve might be dying, but it's also that everybody's kind of in a precarious situation.
All of the plates just got thrown up into the air by the time we reach the end of this. In that particular scenario, everybody's string is tight.
We tend to leave episodes very like inviting you to continue, but if memory serves, we don't get out and out cliffhangers like this very often.
In this one in particular, the way that Steve was being dragged underwater and the way the camera rotated when he went through the entry point of the gate to come out the other side, it was like we just got an early look at what it was later going to be, the physics, which I also was like, cool.
And I guess that's going to lead us into final thoughts on Chapter 6.
The dive.
I
back up saying that coming into the beginning of this episode and where we leave it in the end, we are definitely in the business end of the season. The stakes are getting incredibly tense. We've got characters that are in different, states, in different planes by the time we're at the end of this episode. It just only gets me that much more excited for where we're going. Still think the California crew unfortunately was given the least. I think Susie deserved more. I think the crew deserved more. The rest of the episode holds up really well. Again, I just can't echo enough how much the stakes are just getting heavier, and seeing how much all of this as a form of heavy weight is on the shoulders of all of these young characters in particular. It's hard. It's hard to see such young characters going through such a hard time. I just care about them, you know?
As much as I love the scene at Skull Rock, I have to be honest, like there's a bittersweetness to Dustin mentioning specifically ridding Max of the curse and clearing Eddie's name.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they don't do either of those things.
No.
And so much worse happens to both of them.
Yeah.
So it's weird because it's this wonderful moment in context, but it's like knowing what's going to happen to both of them. It's really kind of tragic. So for my final thoughts in general on this episode, not unlike Chapter 5, I actually really like this episode, except for one arc. This time it's the Californian crew. You know, the L plot bothers me so much less in this one than last time. But the question that Jason asks at the beginning of the episode, how do you expect to stop the devil if you don't believe he's real? That really stuck out to me on this watch. And while I do not agree with Jason, at least not his beliefs by any means, I did find that this question serves as an interesting overarching point for the season and leading into the next, like leading into 5. The only reason I'm bringing this up now is because he asks this question now. Mm-hmm. I suspect that this might mean in season 5 that there might be more addressing of whether or not the truth about what's going on needs to come out. Now we have literally holes in the center of Hawkins.
Yes.
Like hell has opened up. So
this is unavoidable.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. And that's why I thought that's why that stood out.
Yeah.
But on a micro level, this feels very apt to Elle's arc, particularly Brenner and Owens. How can Elle know who she's fighting or why if she doesn't understand the situation? Not to mention the idea of not knowing Brenner's true intentions, especially when, in this episode, she believes she killed the other kids and says it out loud. It's even echoed in Eddie's line, "You're asking me to follow you into Mordor." The notion is, what are you willing to do? Mm-hmm. And we see that in Steve's dive, not to mention the interrogation. Like, it's just, again, as an overarching thread for the season and possibly the next, I just really thought that question was presented at a peculiar time. So, yeah, and I think that with that question in mind, that's also a big part of why the Salt Lake City aspect of it all totally stands apart. Like, you could argue that that's why the heist is there. Mm-hmm. But it feels like I still say it feels like it could have been skipped entirely. Yeah. But overall, like it surprised me how I didn't, again, actually much like Chapter 5, I didn't think I was going to like this episode as much as I did, but I did. Apart from that one section, I enjoyed this episode a lot. I mean, the center of it, weirdly, you'd think it would be the stuff in the, the whole Lover's Lake sequence that is the standout scene for me, but really it's Skull Rock. I love that Skull Rock sequence. It's so good. I love Eddie getting to be a part of this group more actively now. I'm looking forward to covering that and talking more about that in Chapter 7. Mm-hmm. And I love everything you've said about how this is like we're getting into the business end of the season. Like, that's absolutely true. We're starting to trim some of those extraneous bits. And yeah, it's just, this was a good episode. Well, then, with that said, it concludes our contemplation on Chapter 6, The Dive. As always, thank you for listening. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram, or even send us an email, and all the links are in the show notes. If you're a fan of our pod, consider rating and reviewing us. Coffee and Contemplation is available wherever you get your podcasts, although, unfortunately, not going to be on Stitcher for much longer because the app is closing. I just got that news. So, so Stitcher's going away, but everywhere else you can still find us. And then thank you so much, Steve, for joining me for these 2 episodes and turning this into the Scoops Troop for a short interval.
Yeah. Scoop Troop, baby. Well, I'm happy to come back for any other future episodes. And I look forward to at least, I think, talking to our viewers about the finale.
And thanks again to all of you for listening. Until next time, over and out. And so we've been watching Bleach, and like one of the jokes that I love is that like we get to these like serious ends of these episodes, and the credits are happy people. Like what on earth? But it becomes a running joke.